Okay, well, did you stop? Because no, I was too scared. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, it seems that whenever I hand the keys to my car to somebody else, it comes back to bite me. And that started with one of my first cool cars, which was a Honda S2000. And within days of getting it, I let my parents take it for a spin. And I just knew something was going to happen. And sure enough, I get a phone call and they say, hey, really sorry, but there's this parking curb and it had that metal spike sticking out of it. And we didn't realize how long the front of your car was. So, it took a nice little chunk out of my front bumper and, whatever. Not a big deal. Through the course of owning that car, I had, I think, 2 other instances. So one, I let my friend drive it, and he came back with a completely shredded and destroyed tire. I don't even know how. And then another time I was at the racetrack, and I let a client drive my car around for a couple laps. I don't know why. He somehow got a flat tire on the track. I don't know how one does that without driving over a curb or doing something ridiculous like that. But he brought it back in, gave me a half-hearted apology, and then drove off in his Ferrari, even though I didn't have a spare tire with me and no way to get home that he knew of. He just left. So another time I took my Corvette to get serviced, our race team mechanic is the guy who works on it. I was getting new tires on it, and the rears were almost done, but somehow still had tread left on them, which with me is actually a big surprise. So I just kind of casually mentioned, oh yeah, there's still some rubber on there. And he goes, we can take care of that problem. So I thought he would just do a brake stand outside, something like that. No, he tries to drift the car around the corner to the shop, but he doesn't correct the slide properly and actually overcorrects and goes into the opposing lane of traffic on this main road. And this is right in front of the shop. And his boss and his wife was there because she had stopped by to bring him lunch. And so we're all standing there watching this happen. And I'm just going, Somehow he managed not to wreck it or hit anybody and come back into the shop. And we all just he tries to play it off oh, no big deal. I went easy on him because he had to deal with the wrath of his wife and his boss, but he definitely hasn't lived that one down. The funny thing is, another time he and I went to the track together, and I had my S2000 CR out there. I was letting him drive, and one of the problems was the car had mismatched tires, but I had kind of learned how to deal with that and just, okay, I don't push the car. But he was a little bit overambitious. He has since refined his driving skills and is a valued member of our Lemons team and is a very good driver. But at the time, he was a little overzealous, and I think he underestimated the factor of cold mismatched tires. So we go out there, and I'm like, hey, cool it. You got to let the tires warm up, back it off. That was not to be because I think it was the second lap, he comes into a corner too hot, gets sideways, overcorrects. We do the tank slapper back and forth and then slide off the track. And of course, I'm in the passenger seat just seeing this tire wall come at me and boom, slide into the tire wall. Thankfully, we were doing maybe 20 miles an hour when we hit the tire wall, so the car was fine, and I actually drove it the rest of the day. Again, he got all sorts of crap from his wife for that, so it kind of became worth it. The worst 2, actually, and one of them I'll be brief because the person is still sensitive about this. I let them use my GT3 for a track event. I was at home in Ohio, and I was actually at a wedding. And the funny thing was, at the track, nothing happened. Everything went fine. But leaving the track, there was a small incident. I get a frantic phone call from all parties involved while I'm at this wedding, and had to deal with that. So that was a fun one. Probably the worst one of all was my brother-in-law was in town visiting. I had this junky Chevy Prism at the time that I just used for a beater runaround car. And so I was going to let him use that. But right before he got there, there was some noise from the air conditioning compressor. And I'm like, I think the bearing's that's going to break and a belt's going to snap. And, I'm not going to let him use the car because he's not really a car guy. He's not going to want to deal with this. And I was going out of town, and the only other option was this Porsche C4S that I had around that was higher mileage, so I wasn't as concerned about him driving it. And I'm like, well, you can use this while you're here, just be careful and don't be an idiot. So I go out of town for my ski trip, and I get a call a couple days into it. I just knew when I saw him calling that something was wrong. You always have that feeling. And so I get this phone call, and he's kind of flustered, and he's trying to tell me where he is, but at the same time he's asking me where he is, because he's not overly great with directions, which was ironic because he was an over-the-road truck driver. Then he describes to me what happened, and he goes, oh, I got into a fender bender, or I hit somebody or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, did you stop? He goes, no, I was too scared. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh gosh. So I'm like, well, what happened? Like, did you run somebody down or what? And it turned out there's two people merging, and he just kind of bumped them or whatever. Neither person gave way, and just kind of not sure whose fault it actually was. But he had still hit somebody in my Porsche with my plates on it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. I don't really know how to tell you how to get back to my house because I don't know where you are, but you're gonna have to figure this out and deal with it. So he ended up getting back to my house and getting the car in the garage, and I just told him, I'm like, don't use the car anymore. Obviously, I don't know if the person called the police. They probably didn't because it was such a minor deal, but I'm like, you're in a Porsche and there's a big dent on it, so you're kind of obvious, so just, call a cab or something. Your driving privileges have been revoked.